All right, Howell, may I and I continue with this. So this is the biblical, or we could say possible, but I think there's more probable than possible to this. But let's just call it the biblical origins of the Oromo, question mark. I put a question mark because, of course, ones will say, that's your opinion. Well, we're going to present evidence, and in presenting this evidence, ones can come to their own decision. Like we said, this is not, we wasn't, and it bothers us a little bit now because we wasn't really too interested in the Oromo, and other tribes, like we were interested in Haile Selassie and his tribe, and then we found, well, His Majesty has Oromo links. Some try to dismiss that and try to say that there's no truth to it, but the facts basically have proven that, yes, it is true. The Oromo, you can look it up perhaps on the Wikipedia if you want to, though some people might say there's some questionable stuff, but at least it's a good start. Don't say, well, because it's there, it's the end all and be all, but then try to verify and, like they say, vet that out. So we have right here the Oromo equals the Roman or the ancient Romans. Let's put a question mark here. Now, those of us in the Afrocentric and Black liberation, as it's often called, usually by the distractors for detracting and distracting reason, but those who are in the Afrocentric community know that many of the ancient so-called great Europeans, at least the foundation of these cultures, were black. We call it gentrification today, where black people are in a certain community or area, and like Brooklyn, look at Brooklyn today. And now you get all the nations. The nations will move in, and they may keep up the appearance of it. You understand? They want to own this great or this modern kind of legend. They move into these areas, and before you know it, the so-called like Bed-Stuy is becoming more gentrified with the Gentiles coming into that community. But originally, it was what we call the hood. You understand? So how is this any different than other places in the world? We find that this has happened in other periods of time in history as well. Now, the Kibbuth Nages, and in its modern translation here, it goes right here, the Kibbuth Nages, this is one of the, we would say, the best translation. We put on the same level as the King James Bible, and I know there's a lot to be said on King James Bible, but we don't stop there. We can go into the Ethiopic, the Amharic, but we use that as a basic point of reference for those who may be somewhat linguistically challenged, or if they don't have any motivation to overcome that, linguistically handicapped. But this is the Queen of Sheba and only son Menelik, right? And in this particular document, it states a relationship that some have thrown as being so-called mythological, or some have put as speculative, or some have even questioned the historicity of the fact that it mentioned that the king of Ethiopia and the king of Rome, the true king of Rome, are actually brothers. You understand? Because they have the same father in King Solomon, being the father of the true king of Rome, as well as the king of Ethiopia, who we know as Menelik, Bina Lechem, Ibn Hakim, or David the Second. Now let's see if we get the chapter over here where it talks about in chapter 117 of the Kibbuth Nages translation, Queen of Sheba and only son Menelik, but the translation of that means the glory of kings. It states that the king of Rome and the king of Ethiopia, right? And let's go to the king of Rome and the king of Ethiopia briefly. Just give you a quick background on what we have in the background right here. And in chapter 117, right here, it says, concerning the king of Rome, or Rome, and the king of Ethiopia. The king of Rome and the king of Ethiopia and the archbishop of Alexandria, now the men of Rome were Orthodox, were informed that they were to destroy them, and they were to rise up to fight and to make war upon the enemies of God, and it says the Jews, right? And to destroy them, the king of Rome, Inya, and the king of Ethiopia, Pinhas or Phinehas, or Phinehas, and they were to lay waste their lands and to build churches there, and they were to cut to pieces, it says, Jews at the end of this cycle in 12 cycles of the moon. Very interesting. Now, a point of order, because the Ethiopians are Judeo as well. But the difference is that it's speaking of the Jews, or the so-called Jews, who do not accept the Moshiach, those who don't accept the Moshiach or the Messiah, and who were part of that crucifixion of our black Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. And it says, then the kingdom of the Jews shall be made an end of, and the kingdom of Christ shall be constituted until the advent of the false Messiah. Now it goes further, and there's a very interesting explanation right here. Now, elsewhere where it speaks about the king of Rome and the king of Ethiopia is when it mentions Solomon's other son. Now, we know that King Solomon, at least in modern times, is heavily associated with Masonry or Freemasonry or the so-called Illuminati. And therefore, this is also another very, very important link in this whole so-called matrix. But the area that we wanted to present, okay, right here. It says, chapter 73, it mentions Adrami, who is the king of Rome. Then it says concerning the king of Rome, and it's speaking of at Constantinople. And it says right here, and when King Solomon, page 122, chapter 72 of the Kibra Nagas, in translation, the Queen of Sheba and only son Menelik, and when King Solomon had read this letter, he meditated, saying, if I keep back my son, he will send to the king of the east, who will give him his son, and that which I have planned will be made void. Therefore I will give him my son. And he took counsel with the counselors of the house of Israel, and said to them, we have already given our son and our children to the country of Ethiopia, and Israel hath a kingdom there. And now, so that we may have a third kingdom, the country of Rome, I will send thither, or there, Adaramis, my youngest son. Hold ye not it against me as an evil thing, that formerly I took away your sons. For it is a pleasing thing to God, to Elohe Israel, or Hashem, Ha-Elohim, the true God, or the God of Israel, that the men of Ethiopia have learned his name and have become his people. In like manner, the men of Rome, or Rome, if we give them our children, will become the people of God, and to us, moreover, shall be given the name of people of God, being spoken of thus and called thus. The people of Israel have taken the kingdom of Ethiopia and the kingdom of Rome. Give ye your youngest sons as before ye gave the eldest, and let those of middle age stay in our city. So here King Solomon had a plan. There was a Solomonic plan of, one could call it the Hebrew New World Order, for lack of a better word. And part of it was in agreement with God's plan, namely Ethiopia and the kingdom of David being reestablished in Ethiopia. But he also had this idea that from many of the wives he had, he would have children from them, and therefore his seed. He was looking at the victory more through the phi cycle, or we can even say the melionated, or through that physical seed. You know what I'm saying? And in the process, well, we know what happened with Solomon and a lot of his compliance with a lot of practices which undermine the old kingdom of Israel. Some say he already saw the vision, and he knew from the vision that it was Ethiopia that was chosen, and perhaps that affected his judgment, some would say. But now, still one would say, well, what does this have to do with Oromo and the possible Roman connection? I mean, look at this word for a moment. Let's go Rome, right? Or Rome. In the Amharic, we write it like this, Rome, right? Rome. Now, Oromo. So we have Oromo, right? Oromo. In Amharic, that N at the end, the N at the end is called a direct object marker grammatically. So if we have a verb in Amharic, for example, and we want to point that the verb to this noun, we may say Romain, like Yinesal, Yiwedkal, like or something is the verb is directly affecting this noun. This N is added. So it means that the N that's added, when we look at the older forms of it, we find that it's without any N, and Rome itself is without that. So let's continue to look at this right here. Let's see. Okay, there we go. Okay, we have Rome. I don't know if you can see this marker going out right here. See, the enemy doesn't want this particular teaching to get through, you know, because it will clear up a lot of confusion among our brothers and sisters. Because, see, the Europeans, they know more than they like to tell. You have to find it for yourself, and they'll say, no, 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 and you have to prove it. So we have Romo, but all Romo. Then we have Rome, right? Rome. Now, if we look at the primary consonants, the primary consonants are the same, and the vowels here are consistent. Oromo. Here is no first vowel sound. It is just Rome, and the may right there. Now, in Ethiopia, if you're from a certain part of Ethiopia, for example, if you're from Gondar, like Gondar, it's a Gondare, you know. If you're from a certain place, they add this A at the end, which could be a way of saying my, like the Hagare, my country, you know, Gondare, or, you know, Walaye, and there's other ways. But at the end, it's this A sound. The A sound is what we are pointing to linguistically, grammatically, linguistically. But now, so we see this linguistic connection between the two. Now, modern Oromos have chosen to use the Latin, right, instead of the Amharic to write their, to communicate their language. They find that under the Amhara regimes or the Davidic kingdoms, that the Solomonites and the Davidic Empire of Ethiopia has been brutal to them. And we can understand that to some extent, coming from our own particular history as Gullah, you understand, which is a link with Gala, all the same. And we can put this right here, that we have Gullah, that link right there. But okay, what's still the biblical link? First of all, we just want to show that from just this right here would be enough to say, all right, we got something to go on. Maybe there's more to this, in addition to the fact that the early Roman emperors, certain Roman emperors, especially during the Christian times in particular, were black, like Severus and others. We touched on this when we had spoke on the Black Britons connection and black people in Europe, and many of the Afrocentric scholars and others have also gone into the fact that in addition to others besides Augustine, if you know about the Christian Catholic father, they call him Augustine, he was from North Africa, that majority of North Africa and even along the coast of the Red Sea, in particular, Africa was Christian. You understand? Early Africa was predominantly Christian before the Islamicism or Mohammedanism came in and started to change up that particular dynamic. It was basically so-called post-Mohammedan Islam that overran Africa at many vital areas and basically rechanged the whole dynamic of it from being Christian to being Islamic, as we can see the state of Africa, and a lot of that is based on what occurred then. Now, just from this right here, there's the Oromo and the Rome connection, even from the Oromos themselves choosing, and I'm sure that it hasn't been lost on them, Oromo, Romo, Romo, Rome. If we look at the slight difference between this right here and Oromo right here, we have in Amharic, to use the Amharic letters, we have Oromo. We have Oromo right there, and we take off the O, since O, even in the Ge'ez and the Tigrinya and some of the other Ethiopic languages, is like someone saying hoy, like when they say hey, oh, such and such. In Arabic, they may say ya, like they say ya Muhammad. You understand? Ones may say anta hoy, or in the Tigrinya sense would say oh, like o kedus abat, o kedus abatoy. You understand? O kedus abat, o kedus abat, or kedus abatoy. If that was Arabic, they'll say Yaba, as they say Ya Muhammad. So they use Ya in, say, Arabic, or they use Hoy at the end in the Amharic, or in the Ge'ez and Tigrinya sometimes use O as exclamation, calling attention, like saying you there, hey. When we say hey, it's a derivation of the Hoy from the Ethiopic, and in England they say oi. You understand? Oi. So that oi, so without the H gets dropped off. Now, that's all very linguistical, but once again, we can see a clear link between these two, that here's Oromo, and then we have Ro May. You understand? And the only big major difference is the vowel sounds, but predominantly the consonants remain the same. So even right here, we have the Oromos using Latin, choosing to use Latin instead of Amharic and instead of the Ethiopic script, right? We have the linguistic similarity. Now, I think this in itself, and we kind of knew this from before. We made that sort of connection before. Now, what really, in a sense, opened our eyes, remember I said a little bit earlier that the Almighty will lead you into certain directions, even of study and research, that you might not have been intending on studying or researching, topics that you might not have been overly concerned about or really that interested as the topics that I've been interested in, those things I personally wanted to study. And this wasn't something that I really wanted to study, but I said, coming across the facts and the evidence, it's some injustice I would be doing to my Ethiopian people, whether they are Oromo, Amhara, Tigrinya, Afar, or other Africans, and even white folks, and just humanity, period, if we did not share this. Now, in the truth, for full disclosure, we have begun to write certain documentation on some of this research, especially much of the deeper evidence and the more detailed evidence. It's too much to present in such a means as we're doing now. This is more or less saying to ones, if you're interested in this, a couple of things we want to say, want to share, what we know about this, and hopefully we'll get the book out there that can be one avenue. You understand, the Gullah and the Gala connection was really very interesting to us, and most of the information, it would be a little bit tedious to present it just in this means right here, but some of the highlights we can present between the Oromo and the Roman connection, because there were blacks In other words, there were Romans who were black. You know what I'm saying? This is well known even in the so-called Holy Roman Empire. Many of the leading clerics and churchmen and bishops in early Christianity time were black people. I mean, this is clear, this is known. It's been suppressed, but it's very clearly known and clearly articulated, as well as certain Roman or Byzantine emperors were also of the black race, of the black persuasion. So why would should be difficult that there is a possible link between the people that we call or know today as the Oromo and the black Romans? So we have the Oromos and the ancient black Romans. Now, ones will say, well, Africa is over there and Rome is there, and they would wonder in their mind, how could people get from here to there? They travel, they migrate. When climate and things are suitable, they move there. When they see the turn and the tide is changing, they exodus or they leave there. You understand? And plus, there was many persecutions of the black presence in Europe, especially with the rise of white supremacy, that also gives us other possible reasons for that, the change. You understand? The change. Now, this is just a basic etymological link, but the main point now is the biblical evidence. And I apologize once again by giving some of the background, though I know for some this will be interesting. Others are just waiting for like the punchline, so forth and so on. But the original, the Oromo say, right? The Oromo say, and not Arasi Adinos, not Wyndham Yardin, but the Oromo say that their name actually comes from Ilm Orma. Ilm Orma. This is what the Oromos say. The Oromos have testified, and we're not talking about just recent Oromos, but this is pretty well established, and many of the Oromos who know, you understand, this part of their history and culture say that their name derives from the Ilm Ormo, and the Ilm Ormo was translated to mean either the people of Orma, Ilm Orma, or the sons of Orma. Now, in our research of this and the linguistics of it, we found something very, very interesting. That this name Orma, they say, might have been some ancestor or hero, a particular ancestor or hero of the people that we know today as the Oromo. So Ilm Orma mean the sons or the people of Orma, and Orma is one of their own ancient heroes from which they derive the modern Oromo designation and name. But this name right here, Orma, in the Amharic Bible is actually, this thing is, let's get the other marker. The name in the Ethiopic Bible is actually Orna. It's not Orma, but it's actually Orna. Now, if you know the linguistics, the change between the N and the M, whether we say Anbessa, some say Anbessa for lion, for the African lion, some say Ambessa or Anbessa. So the change between the two. So when we look at this particular individual, Orna is a very, very important individual. And guess in whose story? In the Davidic story, in the story of great King David. You understand? Therefore, if this is true that the Oromos derive their name from the expression Ilm Orma, and that Orma may have been a hero, one of their ancestors that was regarded as a great hero, although they have forgotten or seem to have forgotten exactly what were the circumstances from which they derived that this Or-Ma was a great hero, the Bible record actually gives us the evidence, and here is where it is very, very interesting. And this is what we want you to stay tuned for, as we can try to get some better markers so we can tag this up and write this up and everything and clear this, because we'll need more space in order to articulate who are the Ilm Or-Ma and what is the connection of Or-Ma to Or-Na in the Bible. Now, if you're going to look up Or-Na, you should have an Ethiopic Bible and an Amharic Bible. If you look up in the English, very cleverly, the word has been translated in the English in a very dubious or curious way. But we're going to touch on that as we proceed in getting to the biblical roots of the Oromo. So, once again, this is Wendem Yadin, Ras Yadinos Teferi, and we say Shalom, Ras Teferi.